Now, let's play this clip of Bill Maher. He's among those who can read the data and read it well and see the blue states are losing population, they're losing people, and they're losing power.
California is projected to lose 3 seats, New York 2, also going to lose a seat, Minnesota, Oregon, Rhode Island, Illinois, all blue states. Who's getting these? Texas, Florida, Idaho, and Utah. I mean, this looks like game over.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because has been a lot of fear that all these Californians and New Yorkers, all these left-leaning people moving to places like Tennessee and Texas and Florida, were going to turn those states purple or perhaps blue down the track. They were going to take their voting records with them. But perhaps it's actually going to work the other way, that the population shift is going to see more power for the red states.
So there's another counter dynamic at play. So the thing underpinning this, as you say, is this mass exodus from states and cities and counties that they ruin with far left policies, and then they themselves don't want to live in them, whether it's taxes or cultural things or everything else. So they leave, and crime, yep, things that really affect your day-to-day real life. And there is that problem on the downstream trickle effect of that. In local elections and the people that end up coming in, they do drift the lifestyle of the red states more blue. But the counter dynamic over here that Bill Maher is touching on is just a straight up mathematics, because the House seats are based on apportionment. If suddenly 2% of the population moves from California to wherever, Florida, then they lose 2 House seats, Florida gains. And also, he didn't mention this, but it would impact the electoral votes potentially, which is based on the same thing, census counting of the population in each state, and that magical path to victory of 279. It could look differently in a few years if enough of this recalibration happens.
I do wonder if that trend is going to continue now that Trump is president, because is his impact going to be enough to keep people in blue states, or are they going to be even more likely to flee to the red states, where they can see this alignment between that state and the White House and the policies that are being advocated? It's
a good point, because if the big picture improves, the overall economy and wages and the job market and crime and all of that's under his purview, maybe it'll make the left-wing states more tolerable to them, because there is a lot to love about those states. California and New York have amazing things about them that people, I'm sure, the bar is high to finally leave them. The problem is, I think, local politics, and especially schools, where that's the stuff that really hits home. And as long as they keep letting boys play in girls' sports and things like that, I do think you'll see families pick up and move.
Now, this is a big stuff up for the Trump administration. And really, if this reporting is accurate, then heads need to roll. The leftist activist editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine, Jeffrey Goldberg, was included on a message chain in which top Trump administration officials discussed strikes against the Houthi terror group in Yemen. Kosha, this would be a stunning breach of national security. One of the men in that message chain, Defense Secretary Peter Hegseth, was asked about the breach.
Can you share how your information about war plans against the Houthis in Yemen was shared with a journalist in The Atlantic? And were those details classified?
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again, to include the hoaxes of Russia, or the fine people on both sides hoax, or suckers and losers hoax. So this is a guy that peddles in garbage. This is what he does.
Kosha, whoever's responsible, I don't care if it was an innocent mistake, whether it was incompetence or malicious, they have to go. If this is accurate, it is such an enormous breach, and you would just think in the second Trump term, mistakes like this can't happen.
It's not good. And they have very little margin for error on the merits of it already, because it's about a military strike, national security. Potentially, we haven't seen all the messages that were in there, but potentially there was classified or highly sensitive, at least, materials being used in that channel. And then this journalist, who is not a friend of the administration at all, accidentally, or maybe it was sabotage, I don't know, we'll find out. We may never find out. I think the issue is, if it was Mike Walls in particular, that's one thing that's out there in the reporting. He also does bring a lot to the table, national security advisor, and so the role he's playing with negotiating all these deals globally, I'm sure President Trump will weigh that. opposite, this breach. If it were a staffer, a little bit different. And I'll also make the point that it would show, I think, leadership if they did something, especially if it's a staffer, because the same has not happened in other branches, like the Supreme Court never told us who leaked the Dobbs decision, which was definitely malpractice or sabotage. And if he does that over here, I think it's a good message, but we'll find out.
It's incredible because the journalist that's involved in this, Jeffrey Goldberg, is no ordinary journalist, no ordinary editor. He has been at the forefront, complicit in multiple hoaxes and anti-Trump propaganda, including the Fine People hoax. So for him to be the one involved, I think is astonishing. We'll have to wait and see just what the real truth is behind this story. Now let's talk about the peace deal between Russia and Ukraine that's being negotiated. And the New York Post reports that despite the very tense meeting with the US president last month, Ukrainian President Zelensky believes Trump remains Ukraine's strongest weapon against Russian President Vladimir Putin. President Zelensky believes Trump is looking for a big win on the world stage by ending the war. And he said if he wants to, Trump can squeeze concessions from the Russians because he seems to be the only one that Putin fears. Zelensky said that to Time magazine. It was his first interview since that Oval Office dust-up. It's been interesting to see how the fallout from that has progressed. We saw Europe beating its chest and making all sorts of pronouncements about boots on the ground, but it's gone back to the US negotiating this peace deal. It's gone back to precisely what the White House wanted all along.
Return to the fundamentals after all that dust settled. He's right. I think a lot of the points he made, President Zelensky, in that piece, where he says that ultimately the U.S. is his strongest weapon. True, because without the U.S., they don't stand a chance, as was famously put out into public in that meeting. It's true. I think he was honest when he said that Trump is the one person Putin fears, and we can litigate that word, but at least he wasn't saying Trump is Putin's puppet, which is something that the other side has been saying for far too long. And he is right. The third thing he said is that the U.S. can squeeze Russia if they want. I think that's the key here, that the administration may not necessarily want that because they look through the lens of realism. They want to recalibrate U.S. and Russia relationships. Doesn't mean it's perfect, doesn't mean everybody is perfect, but is that a better strategy for advancing U.S. interests when you look at China and everything else? And that's kind of where he's going. So that's what they're looking at. Legacy does matter to Trump for sure, and the administration. They want the win for political and legacy reasons. So all of that is true. And if there's enough alignment across all the players on the chessboard, then hopefully a deal happens soon.
And you do get the impression that what's best for the US is going to be at the heart of this deal. Of course, they're going to try to negotiate an advantageous deal for Ukraine, but it also has to benefit America because that's everything that Trump cares about. And this point about Putin fearing Trump that Zelensky made, well, the fact that he didn't do anything during Trump's first term and he's now seems to be cooperating for now, it says something because we've seen him behave very differently with Biden and Barack Obama.
Undeniably, and that point was made throughout the campaign. People get it intuitively. And I think that's also why the Trump administration, what they're going to try and negotiate, hopefully, is something with lasting impact. Because if the strategy is that he fears only the person in the White House now, that will end in 3.25 years from now. And so putting in place something that is stickier would be beneficial for everybody.
Well, there was that rumour that did the rounds, and the Trump camp did nothing to dispel it, that he threatened to bomb Moscow if Vladimir Putin's forces invaded Russia during his first term. And Putin obviously took that seriously. Whether he was ever going to follow through or not is a different story. But the doubt was enough to see him refrain from doing that. Kosher Gator, thank you so much for your time tonight.